Okay, so I want to take a look at Fedora 42, the latest release, and one of the things I wanted to try out actually was the KDE version, since they've made KDE part of the actual main projects now. It used to be just a spin, but now they've actually bumped it up to where it's a main release, if you will, because KDE has become more popular, and I do prefer KDE over GNOME. But so I wanted to try out the KDE version of Fedora 42 just to see kind of how it looks. I doubt it'll be much different than what has been over the past few years, but I wanted to give it a shot and take a look at the latest version of Fedora 42. It's probably a fairly quick video, just kind of quick look at it. So I'm going to get this downloaded, and then I'm going to boot it up and we'll get started. Okay, so this is what you'll be greeted with when you boot the ISO with the Fedora KDE, and it's gives you this welcome screen, which will go through, how to install it and give you a little bit of information about the system. You can go through and read that, but our main concern is, let's take a look at the installer for the KDE Plasma Desktop version of Fedora. Now, they had mentioned something before about having a new installer, but I'm assuming this is still the old installer, it looks like. Yeah, I mean, I don't see much difference. I don't know if they're coming out with that new installer. As with Anaconda, you want to make sure that this is selected. A lot of times when you go here, you'll think you'll need to select it, but it'll automatically be selected. You can do advanced partitioning if you really want to, but I'm just going to go ahead and do automatic at the moment. Root account, I'm just going to keep that disabled. You can enable that if you want to have root access, but what you can do is just have your username here and have it as the administrative account, and that will help with sudo, so you can still have access to administrative capabilities on the system. If you do a short password, which I'm only doing that for the virtual machine, it'll ask you to hit done twice, or it won't accept the password. Here, if you really want to change like the host name, I think it just defaults probably to like Fedora or something like that, so you can change it to whatever. We can change that host name to whatever you want to. Time zone, it'll usually select your time zone. If you're connected to the internet, it'll usually select the proper time zone for you, and it has here for me. And that's about it. Pretty simple, and you'll begin this installation. Usually doesn't take too awful long, so I'm going to let this install, and we will be right back once it finishes. Okay, that had finished installing. Didn't take but just 2-3 minutes. That really wasn't a very long install, so again, depends on your system how fast it'll install. But once it's installed, you actually do have the finish installation button, and what that will do is actually, I don't even think that will automatically reboot you, so you might be like, what's going on here? So why it doesn't automatically give you a reboot option, I'm not sure. At least I didn't see one, so you will have to actually manually, once it is finished installing, you can still toy around in the live environment, but you'll want to go ahead and manually restart the system so that it will reboot. And then as it reboots, you'll be in the main system at this point, and you will be greeted with whatever password you selected to begin with. So go ahead and do that. My resolution will probably be off because I'm in a VM. You probably won't have that issue on a hardware install. If you're installing this on hardware, again, you'll be greeted with the welcome screen again, which you can kind of go through that, and it'll give you some information about the system. Especially if you're new to it, you'll want to read through this and kind of look at what they got. You see, another thing here is you can share information to the KDE developers. So if you're wanting to give them some information about your system, basically this is data collection to help them improve KDE. It's disabled by default, which is nice, at least on Fedora. I don't know if other distributions have this disabled by default or not, but with Fedora it's disabled. Again, it's supposed to be privacy oriented and all that, but I always don't really do data collection, so I keep those disabled. And then you can enable your third-party repositories. You're going to probably want to do this so you can get your proprietary drivers and things like that. So you want to go ahead and do that so that you can get those third-party software enabled. And you will probably have several updates. A couple different ways you can go about updating, but you can do what's called Discover, which is what this program is here, and this is where your main applications will be installed from if you want to install them through a GUI. You can also do it through the terminal if you're comfortable with that as well. So I'm kind of going to let it see what it does when it fetches updates. We should probably have quite a few. Fedora 42 has been out for several days now. I can't remember exactly the date it was released. I think it was on vacation when it got released, so I wasn't able to do a video. So I know it's been out for a week or two. So, it's showing me a pretty big update, 3.9 gigs. So yeah, it's got quite a bit of an update going. So again, you're going to have probably a pretty big initial update when you install from the ISO. So we're going to go ahead and let that run so we don't run into any issues with the system, because these updates will fix bugs and things like that. So I want to make sure we're not having any crashes and the system will be in good shape. So we're just going to go ahead and let this run. Alright, so what we have here is the system has been rebooted. It probably has a new kernel and stuff like that. So it's going to want you to go ahead and restart to finish those updates. And I definitely recommend doing this before you go any further. This will make sure that all the system updates are applied correctly so you don't run into any issues. This may seem similar to Windows. You'll get these kind of things in Windows as well sometimes. So this would actually be fairly familiar to those who are accustomed to Windows as it installs these updates and things like that. It does work similar, but it's pretty fast. And obviously you can tell it when you want to do it, and you can, you don't have to reboot. It won't, you might be able to set it to where it'll automatically reboot on updates and things, but you obviously don't have to do that sort of thing. You're kind of in control of when the updates are, which I think they fixed a lot of that with Windows as well, but I don't know for sure because I haven't used Windows in any real capacity in several years. And again, these updates seem to be taking a while. It's a pretty good size update, so yeah, a little annoying. As far as I know, they don't update those ISOs from the original release, so a lot of times when you get those ISOs from Fedora, they're going to be several updates when you first get them. I kind of wish I know it's just a 6-month release cycle. They don't have an LTS release, so I get kind of why they do that. But it would be neat to maybe refresh the ISO every month or so you don't have to pull in all these updates. The only way around that would be to get like the net installer, which will pull in fresh updates from the network, and you won't have as many updates to go through. I have a video on how to do a minimal install on Fedora. I think it's the older version of Fedora, but it would work with this as well. You can get that net installer and install any desktop environment from there, and it'll have the updated software immediately because it's pulling everything from the internet directly, so there won't be updates really, or very many updates when you get the system upgraded or installed. But yeah, this does seem to take quite a bit of time. In that way, if you have fast enough internet, I would almost recommend going with the net installer instead. It's still basically the same type of installer, but you can select what you want installed. Gives you a little bit more power or a little bit more choice on how you want the system installed. That's generally, when I'm using Fedora, what I use. And again, like I said, I have a video on how to do that minimal install. And you can start from a basic terminal and go from there and build your own system, or you can install KDE, GNOME, and several other desktop environments. And my son's playing his tablet. I guess I have to make sure it doesn't play any music that would be copyrighted. Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's got his volume up on it, so we'll see how that goes. But this is almost done, so I'm going to let this finish up. It finished and it is rebooting right now. And you'll go back to this, put in your password. Again, I don't have my resolution set, which not too worried about that at the moment. You might even be able to see things a little better, but obviously if you need to change there's several redundancies built into the system, so you can change like dark theme here. I'm going to keep light theme just to make things a little easier to see. But animation speed, I almost like instant animation speed even on a fast system, just because it to me makes it feel snappier if things load fast. And I don't know, I just don't care too much about animations and all that kind of stuff. So the system is up. Let me see if I can get my display set correctly for this. Hopefully that's not going to be too small, but we'll keep that. And this is the system. I'm going to go ahead and change the panel. I kind of don't like the way they have the default panel set up. Again, with KDE, there's so much configuration you can do to this system. The default configuration works perfectly fine. They don't really toy with it a lot in Fedora, so this is pretty much basically what it's going to look like, you know, upstream. So they really don't do a whole lot of toying around with it other than like background settings. So if you want like a pretty much what KDE is supposed to look like and act like, Fedora is a great option to go with. But that being said, I like to change I don't really care for the floating, and I like to make this just a little bit bigger just because my eyes are horrible. And that way I got a little bit of a bigger panel. I prefer that. Again, like I said, the software center, which will load. I don't know if it has, let's go say OBS. Alright, see, they have it from Fedora, or you can do it from FlatHub, or you can do it from Fedora's own Flatpaks. I personally recommend getting most of your software like this through FlatHub if it's available, not for the Fedora Flatpaks. Those can have some issues, especially they've had some issues with OBS in the past. My recommendation is to always go with the FlatHub version, the actual FlatHub, and don't mess with the Fedora Flatpaks, or just the standard ones. But with something like OBS, you're going to want the FlatHub. But they should have most things. You know, you have Google Chrome that you can install. They should have things like Brave, you know, and it'll tell you where it's installing from, so you can get those things installed. I actually didn't mean to install. I accidentally clicked install on Chrome, but oh well, so what? It's installed. I don't usually use Google Chrome, Brave, or Firefox. Those are the two that I generally use. If I run into some sort of issue with either one of those, I may install Chrome just to see if it's an issue with one of those browsers. But generally speaking, I've not had any issues with Brave. It has all the built-in ad blockings and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, a lot of people don't like Brave with some of the weird stuff in it, but you can disable anything you don't like about it and use it. But obviously, use any browser you like. If you like Google Chrome, hey, go for it. There's good, still decent extensions for Google Chrome that can block ads. I know they got rid of some of the best ones, but even the uBlock Origin Lite version works fairly well in Google Chrome from what I've tested. So, you know, use what you like. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Okay, so one of the things I like to do with Fedora, which I don't think they automatically do, is what is called RPM Fusion. Now, this will enable things that they can't ship with Fedora because of licensing and things like that. Since Fedora is a US-based, United States-based organization, some of the things they can't release on their official ISO because of licensings and things like that. But you can enable those things legally from RPM Fusion. You go to just rpmfusion.org. This is going to be able to enable extra packages and things you may need. Find the version you're using, which we're using Fedora 42. So you can set this up. It'll download a file, and you can you're going to want the free and non-free ones. So once it downloads, you can just click on that. It'll pull it up here, and you'll have to, it'll pull up Discover, and once you click that file, and you can install right here, click that. It'll probably ask you for your password. And let's see, did it do it? There we go. Yeah. And so that will give you RPM Fusion. You'll want that one, and you will want this one here, the non-free stuff too. This will give you codexes and things like that you may need. You can install. I don't know why I have to do that twice, but for some reason I've had to do that twice. If you prefer to do it in a terminal, they have the terminal commands to set this up, but you can also do it with the GUI just as easy, and it all works. I think this might automatically, let's check. Again, I usually do this through the terminal, so I don't really know 100% for sure how this works, but I don't know if you have to run this command to enable the app stream for Discover, but it doesn't hurt to work. Again, read through all this stuff on RPM Fusion, and it will guide you step by step on how to install those things to make sure you enable RPM Fusion. This is good, especially if you're using like an NVIDIA card. You're going to want to be able to enable this so that you can install your NVIDIA drivers. I think. Now, they may enable NVIDIA drivers nowadays. I don't remember. I don't use NVIDIA. So again, just run through that. That's pretty easy. So that's pretty cool. And then what you can do is, if you're wanting to install the common things you need, I always go here to multimedia, and I swap out the FFmpeg. That will give you some better codecs and things for multimedia. Again, follow this step by step, super easy. Basically, it's just copy and pasting commands. Here's your additional codecs you may need, so you can install those. And this will make sure you have everything you need to have a good system up and running. Now, here's your accelerator codecs. If you're using, depending on the driver you're using, or video card you're using, if you have an Intel video card, you'll install this. If you have an older Intel card, you'll install this. If you're using AMD, you'll install these. And if you're using NVIDIA, you'll install these. I'm not going to worry about that on this virtual machine at the moment, because I'm just using open source drivers on this system. But if you need these hardware accelerated codexes, figure out which video card you're using and install the proper one here. If you have a DVD or you need to play DVDs, they're not supported out of the box, so you'll have to install these packages to enable DVD playback. I don't use DVDs, so I don't really need that. This is for various firmwares that you may need for some of your hardware that can't be released through the official ISO. So it doesn't hurt to go ahead and install those firmwares to make sure all your hardware is up and running. And generally speaking, after you do all of those updates, I would go ahead and reboot, just to make sure that all that is, especially if you did the drivers like the NVIDIA drivers or the AMD drivers and updated Mesa and all that. It's a good idea to go ahead and reboot to make sure that all that is enabled and ready to go. I have absolutely no idea why it changed my desktop background. Anyway, that was weird. I don't know why. I just ran an update and it did the background, changed it automatically. I don't know if it's set to auto change or what, but okay, whatever. We have a different background. So anyway, if we look at the system here, you can type in about, oops, I can't spell. Type in about, go here to about the system. It'll tell you what version of everything you're running. You're running the latest Fedora 42, the latest Plasma version, the frameworks version for Plasma, which is all the extra gadgets and gizmos, the Qt version, which is the version of the coding language basically that is used for the interface. And here's your kernel, which is 6.14.3, which is a very new kernel, if not the absolute latest kernel. Let's go to... That's one of the cool things about Fedora is that even though it's not, well, they're just a point release, but one little point behind, that'll actually be updated probably very soon. They do quite a bit of testing on their kernels before they release them, which is nice. The one thing I like about the Fedora releases, even though they are point releases every 6 months, they still update the kernel regularly and things like that, whereas something like Debian and Ubuntu, you have to either in Debian you have to wait for a new kernel to be released in backports, install it manually. In Ubuntu, those point releases with the hardware enablement kernel will get you a newer kernel, but it's still generally not the absolute latest. Fedora is more rolling in their kernel releases, so you'll usually get the latest kernel releases pretty quick in Fedora, even though you're using the point releases. So that is a very new kernel. So one of the good things about Fedora is it has really good hardware support. If you have newer system, newer hardware, as long as you enable things like the RPM Fusion and all that, you're going to be good to go as far as installing or having support for those latest softwares. And that's pretty much it. This was just a quick look how to enable Fedora, RPM Fusion, how to install the system really quick, and a look at the now official version of the KDE. It's not a spin anymore, it's an official version of Fedora for the KDE, which I prefer and a lot of people prefer, and it's a beautiful system. Works amazing out of the box, especially once you enable everything like RPM Fusion, things like that. Good support, it's usually an easy upgrade path from like 41 to 42 to 43 and so on and so forth. The upgrade path is usually pretty easy and pretty painless. Every once in a while there might be a hiccup, but it's pretty good. Do I necessarily recommend Fedora for the absolute newbie? No, I don't really, because there are a few steps to make the system work correctly, and every now and then they will introduce bugs. The thing with Fedora is that they push the latest software pretty fast, so sometimes things aren't quite ready, and you may run into some bugs and issues and instabilities on certain systems. So as somebody who's brand spanking new to Linux, I would say stick with something like Linux Mint, Zorin OS, maybe even Ubuntu LTS or something like that to kind of get your feet wet. That all being said, Fedora is a great option. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll try to do some more soon. I would like to do a Gen 2 video, but that will be a long one and will take some time. But I'm hoping to do a basic how to install Gen 2 video, especially now that they have ways to install it a little bit quicker. So that's a video that I've got in the works that I hope could help people who might be a little nervous about installing Gen 2 get that up and running, which would be fun, and explore some other distributions and releases as they get released. If you have any recommendations, anything you want me to talk about, discuss, to clarify, just leave a comment, like and subscribe if you will. It really helps me out. Really enjoying my channel, really enjoying people watching the videos, and God bless every single one of you guys, and I pray you have a great day, and thank you guys so much for watching.